Hello viewers and welcome to my new video. In today's video I would like to tell you like a really cool and funny story actually from my musician's life and my musician's experience. So when I was younger, in my teens, I used to listen to this band called Crass. Okay, that's it's a punk band that kind of formed in the 70s, so you may be familiar with it. And I used to listen to that band, and the singer of that band was called Steve Ignorant, or that was his kind of stage name, if you like. I also became into, and he also kind of collaborated on some Conflict albums, and again I was a big fan of a band called Conflict at the time, and he also sang some of the songs together with Colin, the vocalist from Conflict, on some of the records. On top of that, I also became interested in a band called Schwarzenegger, which sort of was formed after the split up of Crass, and you know that was basically Steve Ignorant's band, and he was the singer. Interestingly enough, I think some of the songs that he did with Conflict even featured on that, but like in a kind of very different, sang in a very different way and done in a very different arrangement. But I listened to all these things, and that was the time when I lived in Poland, and I basically had these cassettes. I listened to these cassettes on my Walkman at the time, and I never actually knew what Steve Ignorant actually looked like. I'm actually not, that's not the complete truth. I think there was one fanzine that I had in which there was like a black and white, basically like a photocopy of a photo, which you can't really see very well what the person looks like. But also on that photo, it was obviously him, maybe in his, early 20s or something like that, with some like, hair, spiky hair or something, I think, and sort of wearing all black and being sort of on stage, and I think that's kind of what it looked like, and it was that kind of image, I think, stuck in my head, and that's kind of what I thought. That's what Steve Ignorant kind of looked like. Okay, so then fast forward, say maybe like 20 years or something from that time, and I'm playing a gig with my band called Manifest at the time, and we were invited to play. This is a really tiny venue, by the way. It's a pub called The Station in a place called Ashton-on-the-Line in Greater Manchester in England. Okay, so this is quite a quirky place, and I quite actually like it. There's lots of live acts actually playing there, but this place is tiny. Think about it's like the pub itself is already tiny, but they've sort of used like an area where there was like an original sort of sitting as a stage. So there isn't an actual stage. You kind of stand on the floor where everybody else is, and in front of you there is a bar, and the bar kind of goes like sort of that direction, and then there's just a little bit extra space next to the bar, but between the bar and the wall, which isn't actually that wide, for people to kind of watch. And then there's another kind of room onto the sort of the side, left-hand side from the stage, as you stand on stage, sort of towards the left. And then there's some seats basically there where people kind of like to sit and enjoy their beer and listen to bands. Anyway, so we were there, and I put up my band's merch effectively on a table which was like to the left of that stage where people were sitting, and initially I was kind of there, minding that merch and selling that merch to people, and then as we were about to go on, well, sort of I then sort of went, I think someone else was kind of looking after it, but anyway, what happened was I was just sort of about to start preparing for our set and to go on stage and to start playing, and that merch was there, and then, but because I sort of left my position there, I saw there was like a couple of guys basically sitting near that sort of merge table, if you like, where all the merch was, where the t-shirts were and the CDs and so on. So I basically went over there, and there was this one guy, and I remember that he was kind of, he had I think like a sort of grey hair. I can't remember if he had a beard or not actually now, but I know that he was wearing a hat, like a sort of black sort of hat, and I approached him. I basically said to him, like, would you minding my band's merch, right? And he said, yeah, of course I will do, So I just did that, and then we went on, and then we performed, we played our set, and then we finished, and then I went back to that merge table afterwards, because I was kind of seeing if anybody wanted, or anybody has actually purchased, and I think actually someone actually may have bought a CD, and the guy who I spoke to gave me the money, here's the money for the CD, someone actually bought one, fantastic. And then we started chatting, and I remember that there was a conversation about cassettes, and I was actually talking, interestingly, because some of that was obviously those Crass and those Schwarzenegger and Conflict cassettes, and but I didn't mention it at the time. I was kind of just talking about cassettes in general, and I think he sort of said, oh yeah, cassettes, they used to be like a thing, and I kind of said, well, yeah, I sort of started from listening to music on cassettes, and it was kind of like just like a chat, and friendly conversation. And then later on, sort of the show was carrying on, and other bands were actually playing. So we finished our set. I got sort of changed, and then other bands were sort of still playing. My bass player at the time, I kind of saw him talking to the same bloke, to the same guy, that sort of I asked to mind my merge for me outside of the pub. I thought nothing of it really, and then when he returned inside, my bass player, he says to me, oh, I've just chatted to Steve Ignorant, he's a really interesting bloke, and I said, Steve Ignorant, what do you mean Steve Ignorant? Well, Steve Ignorant is here, he's there, I've just spoken to him, he's at this gig. And I'm like, and then that occurred to me that was Steve Ignorant. So Steve Ignorant was the guy that I asked to mind my band's merch for me at the table. So this was a guy that I was like, really into his work. I was really into the bands that he was sort of the singer for, for a number of years. And I had no idea that he was actually him. And by the way, I was really surprised that he was in this small pub, and he wasn't performing. He wasn't in any of the bands on the night. And I think later on I learned that he actually came together with a couple of, I think there was Andy T, who was one of the artists on the night, and I think the other band that was playing is called the Headsticks. And I think he came with them because they, I think, form some kind of like a scene these days, and I didn't actually realize that at the time, and I had no idea who he was. So there you go, sometimes you never know. You can bump into your idols. I'm not saying that he was my, but he was definitely somebody, like I said, I listened to, and it's kind of interesting, that you can bump into that person, not even knowing that's them, and I think it was probably easier done in the pre-internet era, because nowadays I think all the photos are there. You can actually see all these artists, you know who they are, you know what they look like, especially if they're big or bigger. There will be photos of them, and you can see that stuff. But pre-internet, there wasn't really anything, So for example, if a band released a record, and on the sleeve of that record, or on the inlet of the cassette, there was no photos of the band themselves. It was just like some an image for the front cover, and maybe there were lyrics inside, but there was no actual photos. you know, unless you got hold of some kind of a zine where you could actually, maybe there was an interview with somebody and maybe a photo was there, you actually had no idea what these people looked like, unless obviously you went to see them live. Maybe if they came, and you know, I lived in Poland, I don't recall Kras playing in Poland, especially not when I was going to gigs, and I think they would split up anyway. They didn't really exist at that time, so it wouldn't have happened anyway. So effectively, you know, unless you went to see them live, or you had a zine with a photo, or they actually published their photos on the record itself, there was no way of knowing what these people looked like. So this is the funny story from me for today, that sometimes these things actually can happen, that you can actually bump into somebody that you were kind of like maybe into, or you know, that kind of thing, and then all of a sudden, oh yeah, it's that person, but I had no idea, and they just talk to them like I would to any other person. So that's the story. Thanks very much for watching today's video, and I'll see you in my next video.